Okay, I'm gonna be honest. This really isn't the video I wanted to make this week. A few weeks ago, I reached out to my friends at Zounds, and they sent me over the Polyend Play Plus. It took a little while to ship out, and I got it earlier this week, I think on Monday. Despite there being a little bit of controversy around this thing, which I will talk about later, I've been pretty excited to use it. Full disclosure, like I said, this was sent by Zounds, not Polyend, but about 2 years ago-ish, Polyend gave me $150 off of a tracker, the original Polyend tracker, in exchange for just making some videos. There was no content overview. There was no like, this is what you're making or not. It was just make stuff with it. And they were really nice, and they gave me $150 off. So there's been a working relationship in the past. I haven't talked to them in a long time, but just know that, full disclosure. If any of the good folks at Polyend are watching this, I hope they take this criticism constructively. I'm really not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but the fact of the matter is the Polyend Play Plus as it currently exists is a mess. It really is. It's a device I've experienced multiple glitches with, and it honestly reminds me the most of the Machine Plus when it first launched, for a device that has so much promise but so many issues. I'm willing to entertain the idea that I got a lemon. It would be the easiest explanation for why I've had so many issues. Regardless, I'm gonna review this unit as I've experienced it. I'm going to talk about the experiences I've had. If these happen to be outlier experiences, so be it, but it doesn't change the fact that I was shipped a normal retail unit that has so many problems that if I had paid my own money for this, I would have immediately turned around and returned it. So let's talk about it. So first things first, this thing just crashes a lot. And something that's really important to know about this device, this is true of the Polyend Play Original and the Plus, is this is a sample player. It is not a sampler. This is an important distinction because the way you make almost any sounds come out of this thing, and especially the original, is by loading up sample folders, sample packs, or individual samples into folders that you create, and then playing with those samples through this interface of this grid of LED lights and pads. It's important to note this because it means if you have an external audio source, there is simply no way to get it into here. And even for samples you already have on board, there's no chopping. And so you're not taking in a loop here and chopping it up like an MPC, and you're certainly not sampling anything in. This is in stark contrast to the Polyend Tracker, a device I've enjoyed quite a bit, even though it has some limitations. Now the Polyend Play, the original, had some of the same limitations as the Tracker original. Both of them only played mono samples. Now the Tracker Mini plays stereo samples, and the Polyend Play Plus also plays stereo samples, so that's cool. However, it really seems to struggle with loading samples. Now, when I started using the device, I only used the built-in folders of samples. If you go into Samples, Load Sample Pack, there's a bunch of packs that are already installed, and that's really cool of them. And for the most part, loading those in works pretty well, although loading a pack does use a lot of the available memory per project. Even just using the built-in samples, I was still getting a lot of crashes and a lot of glitches. And this thing does seem to autosave, but it doesn't autosave everything before it crashed. I've lost multiple changes and elements to a song or project when it crashed, and then I reloaded only to find that the last few things I'd done were gone. Which means that now I manual save after almost every change I make, which I guess is a good behavior, but is not something I feel like I have to do with most devices. Frankly, this level of instability means that the performance idea behind this thing, which is half of the whole deal. It has a button and a mode for perform. That's what these colors are. This is the performance mode. I would never, ever, ever in a million years trust this device for live performance due to how much it crashes. If they were to fix the crashing, that would be a big win, but it's not the only problem I had. In fact, the worst glitch I had is one I can no longer replicate, which is good, but I had spent about half an hour to an hour working on a song, and then I turned off the device, turned it back on, loaded a different song I'd worked on just to listen to some of my sketches, and then went back to the one I'd most recently worked on. And it created a glitch where instead of playing a hi-hat sample, it was playing one of the other samples in my project. But it was still calling that sample hi-hat. And one thing you'll note is when you're working in a song, this is what all of the samples look like. White dots on this track. And these samples, unlike many other devices, can be anything. If you know anything about the Polyend Play, you already know this. But All of these could be any sound. This is cool in that you're very flexible in the timeline. This is a logistical nightmare. Please correct me in the comments if there's a way to, the systems that you have or ways of knowing this. There's no way for me to know without holding Shift, making sure I'm touch the sample knob, select each individual step, hit Shift again to deselect. Okay, so this was a snare, great. This was a hi-hat, okay. This was a pad, cool. Now you can make some assumptions. I've been using the top row for kicks, so these are probably all kicks. These are probably snares, right? Let's see. Yep, I've been using the second row for snares. That's fairly self-explanatory, but if you start to take advantage of the fact that you can pick and place a sample anywhere, it becomes very easy to have a stab, a kick, a lead sound, anything anywhere, and have no idea, unless you shift and select each one, what sound is which, especially if you're playing with multiple projects and going back and forth. If someone has a workaround for this or can color code these so that like I know the blue ones are kicks and the yellow ones are snares, that'd be great, but I'm not aware of that. But if it exists, my bad. I'm complaining about something that there's a fix for, but I don't think there is. So on a fundamental level, this is a device that is very much hard to read. I don't know what most of this is. On any given project, let's just load a different project. Go back, sorry. Back, click, file, open project, don't save. Let's go to Chivalrous Rake, open. And you are going to be opening and closing projects if you do a live performance with this, because the sample memory is really limited, and we haven't even talked about the new synth engines, but you can only have 3 presets per project, and you can't parameter lock and change the presets in different patterns. So if you try to build a whole set out of the 128 or however many patterns you can have, you still would have to use the same 3 synth presets for the entire thing as of right now. Oh, and I think it's going to freeze opening this project. So this is a fun example. I was going to say opening projects can take a while, so I wouldn't love that process of performing live with it. But as we can see, it's just going to crash, I think. This is plugged into a power adapter right now that is able to charge my ROG Ally gaming device, my iPad, my iPhone, all of my gaming controllers. I've had crashes on this cable. I've had crashes on the built-in power adapter and cable. It doesn't seem to matter what power source I'm using, I'm going to get crashes. And this is very much a crash, so that's fun. And the only way I can really fix it, we can try, let's hold down power and just see if it turns off. It should, but if it doesn't, we'll just unplug the cable and replug it back in. I'm using the included SD card, the micro SD card that ships with the Polyend Play. This isn't working, let's unplug the cable. Yeah, and we'll hit power and wait for the weird audible click. It's like a mechanical click, and then it'll turn, it's very strange. But at least it turned on normally this time. Okay, great. Now let's try loading a different project. File, whoops, I scrolled down on accident. Open project, don't save. Let's try Testy Crime. Open project. I have a good feeling that maybe this will actually open a project. So I've been distracted, but the thing about that really bad glitch that I had is that it was saying the wrong name of a sample. I'd put hi-hats in, and then it was playing a pad, a different sample I'd loaded on different steps. But it was still calling it the hi-hat, but it was playing the pad. So I reloaded, I loaded in again that same hi-hat and tried to make that the hi-hat. But then it started playing that new hi-hat where the pad was placed in other parts of the track. And it was just, it made me, in that individual moment, it was like, okay, maybe I could troubleshoot this assuming it never sample swaps again. But I started thinking about how much time I'd already put into that project and the idea of putting more time into other projects and then just not knowing if any of the samples were going to play what they said they were going to play and not being able to legibly read even what each note is anyway without hitting shift and making sure I'm on the sample view and selecting an individual step. And hoping I can trust that when it says symbol break 4, it's actually symbol break 4 and not anything else that's loaded in the sample memory. And it's just, yeah, I think on a top level, it's just simply not dependable. And this is an $800 product. Like, it has to do the basic thing it can do. And frankly, it's too basic. It can't sample in. It can only play loaded samples, which means that every time you build a new project, you're going to have to be selecting either a whole sample folder you've already pre-created or individually loading new samples into new folders you're creating using a fake QWERTY keyboard. See if I can show this. Samples, load sample files. Let's just take a hat, closed hat, load it. If I needed a new folder, which when you have a blank project you would, add folder, and then you have to use this QWERTY keyboard that is one-to-one mapped to what you see on the screen, but it is not very intuitive. It's better than not having one, I guess, but because every project needs to have a kick, snare, hat folder if you want to use any of the generative features to create a beat on the fly, and any of the things that reference sample folders, you have to do this for every project, either on device or do all of your sample management and pre-build packs for your songs that you're going to then load on here to build with on a computer. It is such a cumbersome way of getting ready to build a track compared to any other device I've ever used. The MPCs, the Machine, Ableton Push, those devices, I'm loading just a drum kit or a synthesizer or whatever, and then I'm good to go. On this, it is so much more arduous to even get to the point where you can start making anything. And then you do, and you can't trust it's actually going to work. Now, when it does work, and there are people who really like this thing, and I respect those people, it's cool that you could go into a brand new project. Let's do that. Back, file, new project, creating new project. We could load a whole sample pack. Let's load one of the built-in packs. We'll load the house pack. Oh, go back. Whoops, load. Oh, all right, we'll load the chill hop pack. Loading that. It has to load each individual folder. Right now we're at 14, 16, 20% of the memory, 24, 26, 28. We're on folder 4, 31, 32, 35. I believe every folder is designed that it could fit in the memory, but we're at 64, 65. We're on folder 7, folder 8, 72, 75, folder 9, 80%, 82% of the memory, folder 10, 87% of the memory utilized, just loading the sample folder. Okay, so now we can select, whoops. So now we can select these 3 tracks, and let's, just for fun, we'll make the length 32. You're not gonna be able to hear this. I don't have the audio coming out, my bad. We're gonna hit fill beat. We can choose, let's do break beat and fill again. These should be kicks, these should be snares, these should be hi-hats. And it intelligently knows, because there's a folder called kick, snare, and hat, that it can build something this way. On one hand, this is cool. This is essentially like one of the biggest features of this platform. You can basically tell a computer, make a beat for me. I don't want to make the beat myself. Even though I have a step sequencer, you do it. You know, here's here's samples I didn't make, and please generate notes I didn't play. And now it'll make a beat for you that you didn't create. That may be a controversial take, but to me, on a base level, this device is essentially GarageBand loops in a box that crashes all the time. I know that's mean. I don't want to be this mean. And there are things that are cool. You don't have to use the generative stuff. But then you're just kind of dealing with a really complicated, very hard to parse sample player that cannot sample, that has a very small memory, apparently, for samples, and it's just undependable. So yeah, I think if they ironed out every glitch, and to be fair, this is the 1.0 software version. I could not find a newer stable release. There's a 1.1 beta, but I don't feel like putting beta software on a device and trying to review it that way. This is 1.0, and so on one hand, I was like, well, this is the first release, right? Maybe they'll figure it out. But if you look at the Polyend Play, not the Plus, it's on like 1.4 or 1.5, because that's a device that's existed for 18 months. We're not talking about a net new platform. We're talking about an improvement on an existing platform. if making those changes made it so unstable it's not dependable, I don't know why they released it already. And that takes us to the big controversy around this device, besides everything else I've already said, which is that there's a fair number of people who are frustrated that the original Play came out like 18 months ago, maybe 2 years ago at most, and was $800 for a worse version of this that didn't have four synthesizer engines, 3 of which could be used in one project, that didn't have stereo sample playback, that didn't have, there's audio out over USB, which is cool if you do build something and you can trust it's going to play the samples you put in. You can listen to all 16 tracks, I think, synthesizer audio out and sample audio out into a class compliant USB device, which is a really cool feature. I'm glad it's there. The people who bought the original Play don't have that feature. They can send theirs back for a $400 credit towards the Plus, or they can sell it for pretty cheap on the used market, because when the Plus came out, Polyend also dropped the price of the original Play to $500, which immediately lowered the cap on what a used version is worth. So if you wanted to sell this in the used market, you'd probably get less now than the $400 they'd give you to trade it in towards the Plus. Anyway, there are different schools of thought on this. I do think having a trade-in program is cool. I also think they probably should have just not dropped the price of the original as low as they did. It's maybe good for new users, assuming the original Play doesn't have all the glitches I've seen here, but it feels like Polyend kind of put a giant rake in front of themselves and walked on it and then hit themselves in the face. Again, I really didn't want to make something this negative. I do feel bad about this. I like this space. I think it's important that creative companies are out there making new tools, that this community exists and gets to enjoy gear and make music. But for $800, this is not ready for prime time. This is really just, it's been an unpleasant experience to use. Even if it could do what it's supposed to do without crashing, it's not for me. But it's crashing and doing so many other things that I can't even trust it to get to that point. And there are moments of fun and joy in this device that I absolutely see. But for $800, you're paying more than the MPC-1. And I know they're different types of devices. The MPC-1 is kind of a DAW in a box. The Play Plus is very much a groove box. And seeing these devices and using them helps me understand the difference between those categories. But frankly, I just could not recommend this product in good conscience. The synth engines seem cool. They're a little quiet compared to the other sounds, at least the built-in samples. And also, it's worth noting, there's no mixer page like there is on the tracker. This is also true of the original Play. So it's very difficult to actually get your balances right. There is a master effects section with a limiter with different profiles like squishy, boom, release me, and a sound parameter, which is, I think, like a general global EQ, correct me if I'm wrong, with like flat, clean mix, scoopy-doo, boombox, etc. It's very hard to purposely get like a professional sounding mix out of this because you don't have the ability to just see the volume levels for each of the tracks. You basically set the volume per step instead. And yeah, when I booted it up, it was the least intuitive device I've used in a long time, but when I started to wrap my head around it, I got it. You can get pretty fast with it. You can get pretty quick with it, but it's not dependable. And that's the cardinal sin of any device for me, is like, can I trust this to do the thing it's supposed to do? And if it can't, what even is it? And so for me, it's a 1-2 punch of, this device is absolutely buggy. I cannot depend on it. You saw it crash when I was just loading one project from another that I just turned this device on before I started filming. You saw loading one of the built-in sample packs takes 86% of the available RAM. So you're better off really building your own sample packs or loading just individual samples into folders in real time, which is a very unfun process to finally get to the point where you can make music. I know there are going to be people who love this. I know there are people who do love this. And they're not necessarily wrong, especially if they're not getting the glitches I'm getting and they like the workflow. That's great. I'm not trying to tell anyone who likes this that they shouldn't, but I wanted to like this so bad. I didn't go out of my way to try this device so I could crap on it. That's not what I do on this channel. Anything I've ever had on this channel was because I thought it would be cool. and I wanted to learn it, and I was excited about it. But yeah, I'm just borrowing this, like I said. I'm going to send it back to Zounds. Originally, I was going to hold on to it for a long time, maybe even buy one with my own money, but absolutely not. At this point, no way. For the money I would spend on this, I would so much rather get a used MPC Live 2, a used Akai Force, a used Machine Plus, a brand new MPC 1, even something like a Tracker Mini or my original Tracker, although I don't know how I even feel about those devices right now. I would probably have sold the original Tracker, but I made one song I really liked that's going to be on my album, and anything that ends up on my album, it feels weird at this point to get rid of the device I made the song with for sentimental or logistical reasons. But yeah, I really didn't want to rain on this thing's parade. I wanted to enjoy this device, but it's just a mess right now. Maybe it'll get better, but I would keep an eye out for bug reports, release updates, feature updates. Watch other reviewers, read other reviews, see if other people are having different experiences. Buy it from somewhere with a good return window if you're going to buy it. Or wait and see if in a year or two they drop the price by $300. I don't know. I feel like I'm burning a bridge with this. I'm not trying to, but I would much rather keep it honest with you, the viewer, than anything else. So I really wanted this to be cool, and there's a lot of ways in which it is kind of cool, but I have not seen enough people talk about these issues. So maybe I just am a statistical anomaly and I got a broken one, but yeah, no way. I would not in good conscience recommend this right now, and I will very likely send this back to Zounds within the next month or two, if not sooner. Anyway, hope you have a good holiday time of year if you celebrate holidays this time of year. And if you enjoy this video, please consider checking out my music on Spotify, Bandcamp, Apple Music, or wherever you listen. All right, I'll catch you soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.